later of the podcast. So Mike, camera is yours, and Mike as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you so much. So as Barbara mentioned, my name is Fran. And before we start, I want to give a warm thanks to everyone who is here today. Being a student myself, I know how difficult the times have been. And I've also seen firsthand how much time and effort it takes to bring this situation to a success. So I just personally want to thank you and applaud all the beautiful work that you're doing. And then I want to tell you a little bit about what we're going to be discussing today. Today I will be joined by an expert panel. You already met Barbara briefly. Besides that, we will have Kostas Michael, who is the school head teacher and president at the Cyprus Primary. The Cyprus Primary. We have Paul Byrne, who is deputy director of National Association of Principals and Deputy Principals, and he will be representing Ireland. And we have Stig Johannesson, who is the federation leader of the School Heads Association from Norway. And these experts will join me in the panel later to answer some questions, both from myself, but also questions from the audience. But before that, we have a couple of other things lined up for you. We will start off with a short podcast. During the summer, I interviewed a bunch of school leaders from Europe to ask them how the situation, how the COVID pandemic in their country was received, the types of solutions that they implemented, and also to share some best practices for other school heads. The original podcast was 45 minutes, and you can find this on the ESHA website. But for today's purposes, I tried to make a smaller one, which is only 7 minutes. Now, please keep in mind that a short podcast like that usually lacks the depth and nuance, which really makes a discussion like this important. But that is why we have the expert panel to kind of delve deeper into that part. We will also have a presentation by Lutza, who is going to present her market research findings. She did a research within ESHA to see how school heads and school leaders have been handling this pandemic, and she will share shortly some of her results with us. And then afterwards, we will join the expert panel and get to the interviews. As I mentioned before, you can also put in your own questions. You can put them into the chat, and then Lutza will filter them for me, and I will get to as many questions as I can within the time. So then I want to suggest that we first start with the podcast.
Hello, my name is Fran Palokai. Welcome to the special podcast released by the European School Heads Association. We will have a look at the implications of the COVID-19 virus for educational institutions throughout Europe. The past months have been a rollercoaster ride of emotions and challenges. Many of us have not experienced a crisis of this magnitude in our lifetime, and the trauma that it has caused to our communities will leave us changed forever. But even though a lot of horrific things happened and many people suffered, the knife cuts both ways. Because it's only when we experience the darkness that we can see the light. It's in the tough moments that we come together, that we don't look at our differences, but at our shared humanity, our shared desire for health, harmony, and happiness. Our learning communities are great examples of this. Educational institutions around the world, small and big, overcame this challenge together. We were backed into a corner, forced to find different alternatives to systems that we've used for decades in a matter of weeks. But the challenge is far from over, and that's why we decided to interview school leaders that are at the forefront of this fight. They will share with us things they have learned during this crisis, both when they closed the schools and when they opened them back up again. They also share their own experience as a person and as a leader. We hope that you might draw a lesson from these experiences so that you can be just a bit better equipped in the challenges to come. And hopefully you will also share your experiences forward, because together we grow. For this project, I interviewed leaders in the field of primary education. Allow me to introduce them.
So I'm Director of Policy at the Association of School and College Leaders, which is a trade union and professional association for everybody in senior leadership in schools and colleges across the UK.
This is Julie McCulloch from the United Kingdoms. And next up you will hear Dragutin Šidek from Montenegro.
Basically, I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher trainer also. And I'm a school principal for the last 10 years. And I'm very passionate about my job. And I see myself as a teacher primarily, because that is something that is very vivid. It's something that is basically part of my life. It's not my job.
My name is Petra van Haren. I'm the chairman of the board of the AVS, which is the National Dutch Schoolhead Association for Primary and Secondary Education. And I'm passionate for leadership because I am totally convinced that the quality of leadership determines the quality of the school. So invest in leadership, and I think quality schools will emerge.
I first asked them what their initial feeling towards this lockdown was.
It was immediately my response to support all school leaders with information, help them with protocols what to do, to be there with the organization by telephone and email with the complete team answering questions every day, and to support them to organize in their local context all the solutions for the organization of the education for children who are at home. But also we had the responsibility to organize the education for the children of the parents who are working in vital professions, like in hospitals, like with police, like with firefighters. So we had to organize day and night school for those children, and simultaneously to organize education for all the children at home.
This is a clear and strong response. Let's hear the initial feelings in Montenegro.
So I would say that first month was the month of learning and high energy. And after that, teachers, parents, and students got in some kind of situations that everything seemed normal for them, this distance learning process.
Hearing these leaders talk about the things that they have tried and the things that they have experienced is valuable. But in order to get some actionable steps and create tangible value, I asked them to share their best practices or tips that you can implement as a school leader.
Something we've been saying to our members throughout, which has been much easier to say than to do, but has been around trying to look after themselves. We know this has been an incredibly stressful and difficult period for everybody. But we know, in the context of our members, some of the decisions that they've been having to take over the last few weeks have been undoubtedly the most difficult they've ever had to make in their careers. They've been having to think about things that they have never previously been expected to be experts in. They've had to work through their holidays. They've had to keep their schools open through those holidays, and they've had to support staff who, understandably have found this very difficult as well. So we've been saying to our members, please try the best you can to try to take a bit of time for yourselves. Absolutely over the summer, there'll be a huge amount to do, but try to take a break as well and look after yourselves.
And lastly, we get some advice from Dragutin.
The first one that I would say that is maybe the most important is the shared leadership. We have to share as a school leaders with the others. We are not there in this, especially in this moment, we are not here to manage school. We have to be leaders that are able to share with each other, the share leadership. Also, my second point is definitely that we have to have the whole school approach here, that we have to mobilize all the strengths that we have in a school. We cannot work with half of the school, or we cannot just say to some of the teachers, we don't have to do something, or some of the students, we cannot just let some students get without learning. So the whole school approach is also something that is very important. And also the third one that is maybe specific for this part of Europe, you have to have enthusiasm. It's not just a work in this moment. This is a moment that all of us have to show additional enthusiasm. This will not last forever, but in this moment, especially school leaders have to be enthusiastic, have to be positive, and have to believe that this will work.
And there you have it, a short insight into what other leaders throughout Europe are doing during these challenging times. I want to thank everyone who took the time to be an interviewee, but I also want to thank you for all the beautiful and important work that you are doing. Because together we overcome this crisis. Together we take our education to the next level. Together we get through this. Stay safe, keep sharing, and thank you.
All right. As I mentioned before we started listening, this is just a very small part of the entire podcast. You can find the whole podcast and also the separate interviews on the ESHA website. So that's if you want to delve a little deeper into what everyone had to say. And then now we're going to move on to the next topic, which is the research findings by Luca Laszlo. She is a ESHA consultant who undertook research among the ESHA members. And she will have a 10-minute presentation for you in which she shares the most important findings. So Luca, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Fran. So I have made this research because the board of the European School Heads Association has asked me to ask our members how the situation is in their countries regarding the school opening. After the summer, it was a very challenging and difficult time because we didn't really know what is going to happen. So we have created a survey and we received answers from 19 ESHA members. As you can see on this slide, we got answers from Denmark, the Netherlands, Norway, Germany, Iceland, Croatia, Ireland, Scotland, Belgium, the Flanders region, Bulgaria, England, Germany, and Italy. This does not cover entire Europe, of course, but as you will see, there is some variety and there are some shared practices as well. We have separated the questionnaire to primary and secondary education. And then we have also asked about a possibility of common European regulations. And then we have asked about their biggest challenges, their biggest strengths, and some good practices. So as you can see on the screen, there were very different protocols for primary education throughout Europe concerning the school start of this year. Most schools have reopened, and although in many countries it was conditional, and they claimed that in case the numbers of COVID positive people would be rising, they would switch back to online education. However, schools were committed to try and provide offline education for pupils. The challenge, whether or not those children who are in risk because they are sick or for some other reasons cannot go back to offline education, will have still access to education, it is certainly a challenge. However, in most countries, they managed to find some alternatives. For example, in Ireland, they created lessons through the television. Most school buildings are apparently ready to receive these pupils. However, almost all of the respondents mentioned that they are struggling to keep the required hygienic or sanitary regulations. There is sometimes simply not enough space to keep the required social distancing regulations. So although schools and school heads are trying their best, sometimes they need to be a little bit more flexible and ensure that although the children are safe, they can also attend education as normally as possible. As you know, there are very different practices throughout Europe concerning the safety regulations and practices. You can see on the charts that there are very different practices concerning wearing masks, keeping social distance. However, in primary education, especially, although for many children it is not mandatory, in almost all countries there are very different regulations for the adult staff of the schools, and they will have to wear masks, they will need to keep the social distancing. So although for the children they try to keep it as normal and comfortable, the adults need to take the necessary precautions. Concerning secondary education, we can see that the rules are a little bit more strict, and much more countries require the students to wear masks. The social distancing regulations are stricter, not only in the classroom, but also outside the classroom in the school building. And school buildings here are mainly prepared to receive the pupils. However, the challenges of keeping the necessary social distancing, keeping the hygienic regulations remains a challenge here as well. For example, ventilation was an issue that was mentioned by a lot of respondents, that it is simply not possible to create the necessary ventilation because the school buildings are just simply not built like that. A very interesting question that really divided the respondents was when we asked them if they think it would be good if we had a European level COVID procedure for primary and secondary schools. As you can see, we got different results for primary and secondary, and there are pro and contra arguments. The people who claim that it would be good said that it would be much safer to have a common regulation that is supported by European level professionals. It would be easier for the schools if they wouldn't be influenced by the day-to-day political changes in different countries, but if there would be a European policy that would somehow give more stability. Also, it would ensure the better communication between countries, and we could use the good practices better. However, those people who claim that it's not the best idea highlighted that there are very different educational systems, there are very different opportunities, resources, and requirements on national and local environments. Therefore, the responses need to be tailor-made, and a European level top-down response would do more harm than good. The question remains open, of course, but as you can see, there are very different and very rational arguments for both pro and contra. You can read the full report on our website, where you can also find out some more detailed national situations and the strategies that our ESHA members are using, what difficulties they have faced, and you can also find some examples for good practices. Thank you for the opportunity to present my research.
Thank you for that, Lutza. And then we're already going to move into the expert panel. So I would like to welcome once again Barbara, Michael, Paul, and Stig. Sorry, Konstas. I learned that just the other minute. And before we get into the questions, I would like to ask you to give a very short 1-minute pitch of who you are and what you do. And then maybe we can start with Stig. Could you give a little short introduction of who you are?
Hello. Stig Johannessen. I'm the president of the Norwegian School Head Association, an association with approximately 4,100 members in the primary, secondary, and upper secondary school. Thank you.
Thank you. And how about you, Barbara?
Hello, I'm at the moment the president of European School Head Association, and I work as a principal in the preschool in Ljubljana, and I'm the part of the board in the National Association of Preschool Leaders in Slovenia.
Thank you. And Konstanz? Okay, then maybe we go for Paul first and then...
Yes.
Okay, there we go.
Hello everyone. I'm Kostas. I represent the Cyprus Primary School Heads Association. Although we are in a process of elections in our association, we are still members of the board, and Maria and Eftichia are also with me. We are very glad to participate to this virtual event today. Hello everybody, I wish all the best for all of us. We'll have the opportunity to express and share feelings and experiences later. Thank you for inviting all of us to this event.
Thank you for that. And then lastly, Paul, could you give a little introduction?
My name is Paul Byrne. I'm Deputy Director of the Secondary School Leadership Association in Ireland, which is the National Association of Principals and Deputy Principals. We have over 1,000 members and 735 post-primary schools. We've been actively involved throughout the lockdown which happened in March with the Department of Education here in planning for the reopening of schools. And we represent the voice of school leaders at a government level, but we are not a union. Thank you.
Thank you. Then maybe could you also tell me a little bit, because now we're entering the second wave in a lot of the countries, what is something that for you is now different in the second wave compared to the first wave when it comes to regulations?
Well, I suppose the big difference for us in Ireland is that during the first wave lockdown, all schools were closed and we moved to remote teaching and learning. During this current wave, we've moved to level 5, which is the highest level of restrictions which the government places on the population, but the schools are remaining open. They're remaining open and supports are being given to schools to keep them that way. When the schools reopened in September, there was a fear that the schools would become an area where the virus would spread more quickly. But there was a huge amount of planning done throughout the summer to put in place, I suppose, as much safety protocols as possible within the schools. We had a briefing from the health department the day before yesterday, and they said that within schools, that's both primary and post-primary, which is about 4,000 schools, they have had to risk assess 140 schools, which meant that there was testing that was done. There was 10,500 tests done between teachers and students, and that resulted in 72 positive cases of COVID being found. In the general population, the testing results coming back in Ireland are given about 7.1 to 7.2 positive case results. In schools, that accounts for 2.2, and that has been put down as a credit to the school leaders and how they are operating the safety procedures which were set out within the schools. That's a brief update on our situation at the moment.
It's quite the result. Thank you for sharing. And how is that in Slovenia, Barbara?
In Slovenia, the first infection with the coronavirus was confirmed on the 4th of March. And in that time, we closed all of the schools for 9 weeks and more. So the official data about the number of cases shows that we are now in the second wave. And this time epidemic is much stronger than in the first wave. Which means that coronavirus is spreading rapidly and the number of cases among the population has been rising exponentially Therefore, the government declared an epidemic on the entire territory of the Republic of Slovenia from this week on. The latest data show that we have 422 infected on every 100,000 people. At the moment, around 6,000 people are tested daily, and 26% of them are positive. At the moment, we have 333 people hospitalized, 55 in intensive care, and we have more than 10 deaths from COVID-19 in this second phase. But we must admit that we are a population of 2 million, what means that we are quite small. This time, schools are still opened, what means we still have preschools opened and primary school till the 6th grade. This is the age of 10. The rest of the upper grades of primary schools, secondary schools, and all high schools and universities are working online at the moment. I would say we are much more prepared than in first phase, but at the moment we are facing much stronger wave of pandemic.
Yeah. So do you feel much more prepared? Do you think you will be able to handle this second wave?
We are struggling our best that we would still keep our preschools and first stage of primary schools open till possible. But we are facing the lack of teachers at the moment because also this part of staff is now injured, but we will fight as long as possible.
And what is, so when there's not enough staff to actually run the classes, what is the solution that you have for that?
At the moment, we are cooperating with students from university as well. For example, in my school, where we have 400 and 600 students and we have 85 employees, at the moment, we only have 64% of the teachers still working. We are fully open because we are preschool. Some of the classes are in quarantine, what means if we have there an example of coronavirus infected person, we close it for 10 days. And so far we are working with 10 students that helps us working in the school in the time that we don't have staff. And I'm sure that we will manage it. It can last forever.
Sounds like a good solution. We prepared a little poll question for everyone in the audience as well, as we would like to know how the second wave is for you in your country. So maybe if everyone can fill that in, we can have a little interactivity and also see from a broader audience how the second wave is perceived compared to the first one. Okay, so it looks quite distributed. I see that there's 20% of people say 8 or higher, so it's definitely more difficult than the first wave. But I also see a lot of people giving a 5 or 4, so saying it's kind of as difficult as the first wave, which I can also imagine because obviously it's still very turbulent and we don't know what's going to happen. But I think it helps that we had a period behind us already where we learned some lessons. So maybe it doesn't feel as random or unexpected as the first wave. Okay, so thank you for letting us know your opinions as well. So speaking of those lessons learned, I'm also curious about some of the lessons that you've learned during the last pandemic. And then maybe Kostas, you want to tell us a little bit about a mistake that you have made that you could share with someone else so they don't have to make the same mistake.
Is it possible to share my screen? May I share my screen?
Yes,
Fran?
yes, that's fine.
I will proceed to. Okay, is it possible to say a few words regarding the situation in Cyprus. Before answering your question, please. Well, before entering the event today, I was listening from the radio station in my car, the Minister of Health announcing new measures, because day by day things are going worse in Cyprus. I copied here two titles from newspapers from yesterday and the day before, showing that there is an increasing fear regarding the process of the pandemic in our country. Although you may say that these numbers are very small compared to other European countries, take into consideration that we are an island with less than 1 million population. So we consider that, we think that things are going very bad in our country at this moment. There is a strong fear. And the fear was very strong from the beginning, because the government is afraid of the lack of intensive care units. We think that as a country, we do not have enough units of intensive care. And for this reason, we proceeded with testing and protocols. We are doing many tests on a daily basis to all the population. And we have different protocols to all aspects of social and public life. Schools have specific protocols which are renewed day by day. And let me read something from here. Let's read the last paragraph. If this continues, then more people will be treated in intensive care units, and there will be a hospital with a problem with hospitals. This is the greatest fear in our country. So what happened during the first wave and now? During first wave, things were not so bad, and there was a feeling that things are under control. However, we proceeded to a lockdown, but first of all, we closed schools. We reopened schools by the end of May for 1 month, but from last September, although things are much worse, we opened schools with full population, full attendance, but with strict protocols. Masks are compulsory in secondary education, in primary education only for teachers. And although day by day we have an increasing number of confirmed cases, no one wants schools to close. This is the big difference from last time. No one wants schools to close. So our effort is to keep schools open, and the heavy duty for school leaders is to contribute to this effort in keeping the schools open as long as we can. However, where we have confirmed cases, an incident, for example, in a school, we close one classroom and we keep at home a small number of students with a small number of teachers. So we have something like mini lockdown in where we meet problems. So what are the consequences now? There is a fear, and again, I'd like to say that no one wants schools to close. We try to keep distances by rearranging furniture in the classroom. So the question was, what was a mistake I did during the first wave, which I tried to avoid now? I didn't pay much attention to the interaction among groups of students. I tried to keep distances among students. But now we realize that in any case, one confirmed case, then we will have to keep a whole group at home. So we decided to be very strict in not allowing interaction between groups, between classes. So we have separated the schoolyard, we have separated the territories, we have separated the rooms, and each class moves in a certain area, even outside or inside. So I think that the biggest mistake I did in the last time was this one. Another hard mistake I did is that I didn't pay much attention to the emotional aspect of teachers, students, and their families. There is a big effect on the emotions of teachers. And one of our hard duties now, I mean, the school leaders, is to support our teachers, to be resilient against everything happening outside. Teachers are feeling that they are very depressed from many factors. One of them is that they realized that all that period in which schools were closed, even if we had a big action with distance learning activities, did a damage. It was catastrophic on academic aspect for our students. So teachers are struggling, and I think that two things we have to pay attention now for leaders in Cyprus is to limit interaction among groups and pay attention to the emotional aspect for our teachers.
Thank you for sharing that. How about you, Paul? Have you made any mistakes that turned out to be a valuable lesson?
I suppose originally when we moved to online teaching and learning, we made an assumption that most of the students would be able to access what was being done by the schools. But when we did a survey of a sample of 200 schools, we found that there were 3,000 students who didn't have access to a digital device. And we made some work with our Department of Education to try and get devices for those students. But the bigger problem was that there were 3,500 students who didn't have sufficient broadband access. So even if they had a device, they still couldn't engage. And what we found was that a lot of the students who didn't have a device were from the lower socio-economic backgrounds. So students who were disadvantaged were being further disadvantaged by the schools being closed. We also have a system whereby we give school meals to students in disadvantaged schools. The school leaders, they managed to keep that open in the first part of the lockdown when hotels were still open, in that they transferred funds to the hotels and meals could be collected. But the issue then came when the hotels were closed of how we were going to continue this service. So what we wound up doing was putting food parcels together. Then we realized that the issue of getting them delivered was taking up a huge amount of the postal service's time. And they said that they would only deliver once a fortnight. So we had to put food parcels together in such a way that they were non-perishable and usable for the students. So I suppose our mistake was in making assumptions that students would be able to access education online. And I suppose assuming that there is enough capacity within the postal service to deliver what we needed. So I suppose that's two of our mistakes which we made, making incorrect assumptions. Thank you.
Do you think you're well prepared now that if this same problem arises in the future that you can solve it?
I'd love to say that we have everything right, but we haven't. There is still going to be an issue with devices. The broadband issue hasn't been sorted out. I've only managed to get fiber broadband installed in my house because I have to work from home now in the last week. And before that, I had issues with broadband here. We assumed that the broadband issues were just in remote country areas, but we found when we did our survey that some of the broadband issues are actually within some of the cities as well. The other issue is that the cost of having a broadband provider for students who don't have the money to pay for it, or the parents don't have the money, is another issue. So are we better prepared? We're better prepared than we were. Have we got it perfect? By no means. And we look to other countries who have better systems of engaging with students online, and we're learning from them. And I think that's the value of what we're doing here today, is that we'll be able to make contacts, build networks, and learn from other countries, especially countries who have similar problems with broadband connection. One of the things which we did do in Ireland was we got a television channel to cater for the primary schools, because the one thing that each of the students do have is access to TV. So the lessons went up there. But to roll that out to second level, to post-primary schools, because of the variety of subjects, it's a huge task, but some work has been done on that. If that was in place, I would say that we are prepared. But until we have that in place, I think we will still have issues if we have to close the schools. One of the things that has been suggested is that if the schools do close again for students, that we would still give access to teachers so that they can go in and use the ICT facilities in schools for streaming classes. And sorry, the last thing before I finish up, the whole idea of having a digital timetable for schools. If you have your normal timetable, say 9 classes, 40-minute periods, it's very hard to transfer that into an online system. So what has to be done, there has to be a secondary timetable developed, which is more suitable for digital engagement with students from the point of view of the preparation for teachers getting lessons ready, and from the point of view that it's very hard for a student to sit in front of a screen from 9 until 4 each day, that it would be, say, an hour on, an hour off, or something similar to that. Now we're trying to gather examples of good digital timetables, which would take the place of standard timetables. That's been worked on, but I don't think we're ready yet. A lot done, but a lot more to do. Thank you.
Those are very interesting solutions. I like the part where you use television to broadcast the classes. That sounds like a very massive undertaking, but I think it's also a very powerful tool. And as a student, I can confirm that a proper timetable and not too much time spent in front of the screen all the time is very valuable. I think it's very easy to take what we use normally and now just do it online, but it's a different medium. And I think it's very good that you think about it in that way and also try to present it as a different medium.
Fran, may I add a comment
yes,
on
of course.
Yes, we realized something very similar. Regarding students' access on technology and virtual education means. We realized that students were more vulnerable to family support. We limited our impact as school. Normally, we consider that as teachers, we may have an impact, a positive impact on students' progress. By keeping students at home, students are more vulnerable to family support, and where we had cases that families did not have the means or did not support distance learning. Not just by giving the means, but they did not pay attention to the effort between the school and their families. So if we are going to proceed again with distance learning activities, we have to take into consideration that it's not the same. It's not the same having the kids at school and having kids at home. I think it's not only a problem for Cyprus, but for all over the educational system or at all over the world. Digital education, distance learning is very useful for adults, but we have to reconsider this for young learners.
Yes, I agree. I want to bring Stick in for the next question, which is, are there any lessons or any things that you've learned during this period which you would like to keep when the pandemic is over in the future? So something that's maybe innovative or revolutionary that is a lesson to take into the future.
I think that one of the main lessons learned from the Norwegian perspective is that teachers has get the grip of the technology in their education, and is used in a smart way, in a pedagogic way. It could be helpful for the students with their education in both the primary and secondary and upper secondary school. And also we have seen that it's possible to have more meetings within the classes with the parents, also using, as we speak now on Zoom, it's possible to have solutions in areas where the communications are not so good, to cooperate with the school in a better way. And I would also think that a lot of municipalities has seen that they haven't got a grip on the digitization, the equipment, the broadband, and so on, and they have been forcing the government to help them get resources to actually equip schools with this equipment. The big problem as we speak now is not actually that we have any big contamination of the population. We have approximately 17,000 who has been contaminated during these periods from March. So this is the resources, because we have a strict system that if you have a flu or an instance of flu approximately the same as the ordinary influenza, you have to be home, and that is a stress for the school leaders and the teachers, because you have to have several different educations going on at the same time, and that is stressing also the digital equipment, the digital broadband, and so on. So we feel that learning from this period is actually to be more prepared, work with the teachers and the staff to have thoroughly going through our pedagogical plans for using technology in the education, and also putting it away when you need to cooperate with the students to make them, as previous speaker said, that it's actually important to be in school and not on the screen. It's the teachers feel that they are losing the grip of the students if it's too much on the digital platforms. So the health perspective, the social perspective, is lessons learned that also the government has said that it will not be closed down. We are now on a so-called yellow light, and which means that all schools are open. And I think it will be very tough to close them down, because they have seen so much problems regarding the children who are not, as Costa said, supported by the parents at home. And we also see that children who have difficult conditions, small spaces for the family, have been falling off out of school. So I think that the schools will be open and trying to bring the children to the schools.
Thank you. And is there also something that you have implemented or maybe have seen implemented which you would like to get rid of as soon as possible? Something that is really necessary now, but that you don't actually like having a part in education?
We have implemented the strong limits on the groups in the school. We have sectioned our school, our play gardens around the schools. So it's a very strong limitation of the children to actually play and have fun. And that is hampering the children. And we see some stress on the children, that they actually are starting to get more aggressive in some positions, because they have feeling that they are under strict conditions. So that's the main thing, I think, to be able to to let go of all these regulations for the small children.
Yes, have the freedom to move and just be a child.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually want to move into that subject of mental well-being. And I think we've all thought a lot about the mental well-being of the children. But maybe, Barbara, I can ask you, what would you say to a teacher or a staff member who's just really fed up with everything and their emotional and psychological well-being? They just want to quit. They're done with it. What would you say to someone like that?
First of all, we found out that actually teachers can burn down because they were available for teachers and parents in the first phase of coronavirus during the whole day. So they need to find the work-life balance where they impact the teacher role in it. And we found out that in a way it is necessarily keep individual communication with each child in the class. We found out that if we just have online lessons, also interactive without communication with each children or each student separately, it brings demotivation of children and at the end also unsatisfaction of teacher because they don't think that they are successful at their work. So I'm sure that in this time where physical distancing and remote education is in a way necessary, this social connection is more important than ever. And I think it is very important and crucial for all the students and staff to feel connected and to feel being supported in the community, and that we as, let me say, school leaders also support their well-being in a way of making communication with them daily and being available for them. This is very important. On the other side, I would say that it won't last forever. Okay, definitely not. So being positive about things and invest in yourself professionally and also personally is very important in this time. I would say that in the first phase in Slovenia, we faced that almost 40% of the teachers had serious problems with using ICT. And they were not supported at the first phase so much. So we prepared this time, let me say, in a way that they have all the equipment they need. They won't have it all they need, but they have the equipment on their own because usually in the first phase they only had equipment at schools. So they have mobile equipment, so they feel safe using equipment of their own. And I would say that I do not think that they are as stressed as they were in the first phase, even that in Slovenia at the moment it's quite a huge debate on the media about problems that we are facing, but still we are keeping the positive aspect of going online. We found out that actually the education is the system that can't be closed. It is failure for the society and for each person individually as well.
Yes, yes. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm also curious as attendees and as school leaders and as people working in education yourselves, how everyone is coping with the mental aspect of this. So we also created a little poll just to check how everyone here is doing during this pandemic. I think we now share the poll results. It's good to see that nobody is burnt out. That is very nice. I think it's also a hallmark of crises that you come together and you just get to work. So it's good to see that everyone is still at least keeping up, although we see that a large group is also doing fine, which I guess would be the normal state. You're doing fine. It's different times, it's difficult times, but it's still doable. And there's a small group of people that feel more energized than before. And I think that's also interesting. Some of us have this natural talent to really thrive when there's chaos and thrive when there's a lot of unexpected things. So to those people, I say, congratulations, but let's hope it doesn't last for too long, because then we can all return to normal times again. Then I want to switch back to the digital learning, because I think this is a red thread that we've been seeing during this pandemic. I know that for my university, we've been asking them to do more digital education for a long time, but it hasn't always been a very fast development. And now all of a sudden we've all been plunged into this, and we really had to switch to digital education in a very, very, very rapid pace. So I'm curious, how is the digital education designed at your schools? And maybe Paul, you can, no, you already told us, maybe Kostas, you can tell us a little bit about the digital education at your schools.
Yes, at this moment, we have started preparations for proceeding with distance learning processes. The government has provided all students and all teachers with a Microsoft 365 account in order to use Teams. And the Pedagogical Institute has provided the opportunity to all teachers to participate in training courses for the implementation of distance learning activities. However, most of the effort was placed on how to use technology. And yes, an important number of our teachers said that they had a problem using technology. Hopefully, that was not the majority, but it was an important number. The government, the Pedagogical Institute, has placed much effort on training teachers on how to use Teams, the instrument of Teams, the Microsoft Teams, how to share material, how to implement lessons, how to mute and mute microphones. Students are not allowed to open cameras. There is a restriction on that. And this is a good thing for us, for our educational system, that all of us are sharing a common server using Microsoft Office 365 and the application of Teams. But the bad thing is that there was no effort implemented on how to do a distance lesson, because it's one, technology is the instrument, is the mean, but teaching remains a value in our hands, and it has different meaning when it's done by distance. And this is something we did not have the time to discuss. How do we overpass the barriers of not having eye contact, no physical touching, no physical interaction. This difficult interaction has different rules. We did not discuss these rules, and at this moment we are preparing again for digital processes, but again we are not discussing the pedagogical aspect of this process. So technologically, Cyprus has invested a lot, and we are ready for that. The next step is to do it pedagogically correct.
Thank you. There is many more questions that I would like to ask, but I think it's also time that we get some questions from the audience to ask to our expert panel. And maybe whilst Lucia is sending me the first questions, there is one question that I would like to ask, which is if you could send any message to all the school leaders in the world right now, just one single short message, what would that be? And maybe Stig, you can let us know what you would
keep your positive thinking in your mind and look after yourself, as you are needed more than ever during this time.
Powerful. Thanks. Stick, you want to come in?
Yeah, I can just support that, and I think that it's important that we have focus on the leaders and the personnel in the school, that actually this is not a sprint, it's actually a marathon, and we have to take care of ourselves in this pandemic, because if we are not able to stand there, it will be very difficult for the society. So take care of yourself in this position, in this situation. It's important that you can stand the whole line out.
Yes, plenty of sleep, proper food, and some movement every day. It does wonders.
Because we in Norway have big outbursts of COVID in small regions, and if you are a principal at a school with for instance 6 to 7 teachers, you are responsible for the supporting the community, the municipality, regarding trying to cope with the new condemnation of people in the community, and you are working 24/7. And we have school leaders who have been on guard now for 4 weeks in a row, and there's very, very stressful for those who are in this position. I think the situation will be similar to a lot of other countries in Europe.
Yes, I think so as well. In the meanwhile, I've gotten the first question from the audience, which I will read to you. One of a major concern in the COVID era in our schools is developing competencies, literacy and numeracy mainly, and therefore coping with international surveys. Will the COVID era maintain the need to comply with the surveys, or will it just bring in the need to make for other competencies, or just coping with difficult situations and going towards a more holistic approach of education? So who would like to take that one? Maybe Paul, you want to weigh in on this? So will the COVID era maintain the need to comply with the standard, or do you think we're going towards a more holistic approach of education, a different approach at the competencies?
I think we're moving towards a more holistic approach. I suppose one of the examples of that was in Ireland, the main focus of senior education is the Leaving Certificate examination, which is the pathway to third level. And by and large, people seem to teach to the exam as opposed to teaching more holistically. This year, that Leaving Cert examination didn't take place, and they used a process of calculated grades, similar to what they did in the UK and some other countries. There were some problems with it. There was an issue in the end with some of the programming was incorrect, and there was a few issues. But what it has done, it has focused, I suppose, the thinking towards more holistic education, not being exam driven. In relation to literacy and numeracy, I think the standards, we have to keep them up. But when it comes to moving to online learning, we need to keep the basic pedagogy, I suppose, in focus. How are we going to keep the standards in educating literacy and numeracy to an acceptable level while we're working online? And the other big issue is, how do we keep students engaged? Now, we have a group of students who have set up a company in one of the universities, and what they're looking at is how to translate, I suppose, pedagogy into digital, into the digital field, how to prepare lessons that will be effective in getting engagement from students when done online. I suppose we have to look at the whole lot of it from a different perspective. And I think a big part of it is we need to be focused on the well-being of the students in the same way as we're focused on their academic achievement, because this whole pandemic is having a huge effect on the students in the schools. And I suppose one of the ways that we can reduce their anxiety is to create a safe place for when they do go into school, and also to, I suppose, reassure them that if we do have to close, they're not going to be losing out, that we will have our lessons prepared, that we can deliver, that they will be able to engage. I'm not sure if I'm fully answering the question there, but I suppose we've moved towards a holistic approach. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody who disagrees, who thinks the holistic approach is not the right way to go? No. Okay, that's good to know. Then I also got a question about poverty. The question is, poverty is also a major issue, and even more so after the COVID era, and it comes in many forms. How is school leadership coping with this, also in terms of collaborating with the territory? So yeah, the poverty obviously is very difficult. You already mentioned sending out the food to certain students. How are you coping with the poverty? Maybe, yes, Barbara.
In Slovenia, for example, on the level of primary school and pre-primary school, when we were closed in that period of time, the first wave, we had the volunteers and also the teachers that volunteered and visited those children and those families. And let me say, I'm working in the capital of Slovenia. We are having 13,800 preschool children and tripled number of primary school. So I would say that food is just one example. Then we try to ensure that they also have someone to talk with them. We equipped them with some computers that were not new, but still useful. But I think the most important was that they had also food and the person who supported them, that there was a person who didn't forget that they exist. Sometimes it's very difficult to, or let me say, find out also those vulnerable groups of people that actually were not detached during the school system. And when we close down the system, it's even harder sometimes. So it was a call for those who need it, also through media. So they had a number that they could call in. And in Ljubljana, we had more than 2,000 families that were supported by those extra help. I'm sure that he didn't help all of them, but the school staff was very supportive in that period of time, and they volunteered with that work. So it was efficient in a way.
Thank you. Thank you. And then I also have a question which is about children with special needs and additional support. And the question states that some of these children actually cannot keep the social distance, or they want to uncover the masks from the faces. Do you have any ideas how to deal with this sort of issue for students who cannot handle that the teachers are wearing the masks, or they cannot keep the social distance? Yes, maybe you can tell me a little more.
In Slovenia, teachers in schools with children with special need, they don't wear masks. And also children till the age of 6 don't wear it in general. And I would say that testing those children and testing teachers daily, if they are infected or not, is the solution, and not to wear mask. I would say it's very stressful for both other way. So in Slovenia, we still don't have the system of daily testing. In Austria, I think they're very successful with that. And I wish that we would have that in Slovenia as well, as at the moment, the risk for teachers being in classes with all those children is quite high. But we don't use masks.
Is there someone else who lives in a country where they do use masks and deal with the same problem?
Sorry, one of the solutions that we have been working with here is that the teachers in the special needs classes sometimes wear a visor as opposed to a mask. But in a lot of the cases, the visor is not, it frightens the students as well, that they prefer the teacher not to wear any mask.
Could you elaborate what a visor is?
A visor is just a plastic face covering. that is see-through. I think the big part of it is if you can't see someone's face at all, it's quite scary for a student. Whereas if it's a clear see-through protective barrier, they can still see the facial expression, they can see the mouth moving, and it seems to work a little bit better. But that doesn't work for all students. It's just a solution that works in some areas. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Last question. Parents play a very important role in all of this. I spend a lot of time listening to them and trying to solve problems by means of making way for discussion sessions and small group assemblies. What do you, how do you include parents? How do you give parents a role in this situation? Maybe you, Stig, can tell a little bit about that.
In our municipalities and our schools, it's actually for those who have good systems, they have incorporated the parents very thoroughly to the schools, so they are working together. It's been made national guidance for how schools should cooperate with the parents during this period, and I think that a lot of schools are actually also giving the guidance to the teachers who are responsible for the classes to have meetings with the parents discussing different problems, and especially regarding that we have sisters, brothers who are in a situation that they can't be exposed for COVID-19. So they are actually discussing how they can help those who have to go to school and those who have to be home. So I feel that the cooperation between the schools and the parents are good in these circumstances, and it's much to the teachers and the school leaders to have a good cooperation previous to the COVID-19, and those who haven't have been actually told that you should step up the cooperations with the children and the parents. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. So then before we round off, I would like to ask all of you for some closing remarks, just short remarks if there's anything else you want to share. And if you don't want to share anything else, that's also fine. And maybe Kostas, you wanna start.
Thank you. Okay, I would say that at the soonest possible, we have to sit down and discuss what do students miss in these conditions. Many things have changed. For example, in our schools, we have no sports activities. We have non-learning activities like theater, like excursions. Parents are not allowed to come in schools. Celebrations are also not allowed. All interactions are very limited. So students, even with their physical presence in schools at this moment, are missing many things. Many things who are part of the whole education, not only teaching and learning, but the whole pedagogical process have been removed from schooling. We have to evaluate this, and we have to rethink of things to repair and treat after getting out of this. Until now, we have to collect all this information and be ready for treating and recovering from this damage, because I think that our students are experiencing a damaged educational process. Now, for us, for school leaders, what my last saying would be that I see that you have a twofold duty. One duty has to do with the whole society, with humanity. We have to support whatever we do is for the society and for the humanity, because if we try to keep schools open, if we support families, then this is a service to the whole society. At the same time, we have to serve our educational duty. So I think that leaders should find the balance between the two And as Barbara has stated twice today, we have to take care of ourselves and we have to empower ourselves to be resilient in this demanding process. I think that this is my last opportunity to say something. I would like to thank you very much and congratulate the board for this initiative. And we are very ready for the continuity of these forums. Thank you very much. Best regards to all of us.
Thank you. Thank you. Barbara, how about you?
I would say that, sorry, do you hear me?
Yes.
About holistic perspective on education, I was thinking of that from the previous question. I think that implementing is urgent of a holistic perspective on education, and that aims also at preparing active and responsible citizens who are aware of their rights and preserve principles of democracy, solidarity, equality, non-discrimination, especially during this crisis situation that we are facing at the moment. And having this in mind, we deem of paramount importance that teachers are furthermore trained and supported. We need to invest in teacher training as well, and we have to invest in helping children acquire the necessary skills and attitudes that will allow them to protect themselves and also others from getting infected from any other viruses that are not known at the moment. So I would say that as we as school leaders must be aware of that we need to invest in the people that are around us. If we don't have finances, we need to share our positive attitude and energy. And I'm sure that if we also look after ourselves, we will succeed in that.
Thank you for sharing. Paul, any final remarks?
I'll keep mine very short. My advice would be stay safe, stay well, and stay in contact virtually, because there's a huge amount to be gained from keeping contact with colleagues, for sharing challenges, and for, I suppose, sharing solutions to problems that we're finding. We used to have a motto in our school: look after yourselves and look after each other. Thank you.
Nice, very nice. And maybe Stig, you want to round it off?
Yeah, okay. But both Costa and Barbara and Paul has mentioned a lot of those summing up the points I have, but I would just say that it's a matter of also when you are back in the normal situation to still carry on sharing the good experience, telling us about what we tried and didn't actually succeed with. And also it's important for me to say that we have to focus on, as Kostas mentioned, that we have a responsibility for the well-being of the children. There has been a lot of positions for a lot of stressed children, and we have to focus that in our leadership. So thank you for sharing all of your different experiences. It was been nice to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So as you all know, the ESHA obviously tries to play a big role in connecting everyone here, just like we do with this webinar today, but also with many other initiatives. We will send out a list with the future webinars that will be hosted. So anyone who wants to join and exchange more information can apply via the list. And then we would also want to ask you to fill in the questionnaire. Tomorrow we will send the questionnaire to each and every one of you to also get a little bit of feedback and a little bit of response that we can use for in the future. So yeah, the webinars will be sent to you, and we will also send a questionnaire. And then lastly, once again, I want to thank everyone who came here from the bottom of my heart. It is very difficult times, but I think if we stick together and if we keep fighting the good fight, we will get through this. And as Barbara mentioned earlier, it's not going to be forever. So whilst it lasts, let's all put in the positive energy and try to make the best of it. And I hope, I wish you all the best. I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for joining.
Same. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Best regards.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci.
Thank you, everyone. And as Fran said, please look at your mailboxes tomorrow, and I'm going to send you a list of all the future webinars. I'm also going to send you all the used materials, and then you're going to receive a little questionnaire to provide your valuable feedback that we are going to use for the future webinars. Thank you.